Okay, I'm back.
All right, good. I'm still here.
I'm so glad you stayed because that was my Wi-Fi just totally disappeared there for a moment.
Wow.
Good old, well, we won't mention the name, but anyway, I'm sorry, you were in the middle of saying.
Yeah. So what I was sharing was about the three C's, and I think where we got cut off, I'll just go over them all three very quickly. Is
One was about clarifying your plan, getting on, and then creating a plan.
Creating a plan, exactly. And so then the last part is taking consistent action. And what I found, not only in my martial arts career, but also in my coaching and my entire athletic career, is that it's not necessarily always about the massive action, although sometimes that's very important to do. It's about that consistent action done over a period of time that brings the massive results. And I love the quote. There's a gentleman named James Clear who wrote a book called Atomic Habits. And he says, good habits, they don't add up, they compound. And so that's been really my best tool, is to just be consistent each and every day. And, people say, well, what does it take, to be an 8th degree black belt? And sometimes I just shrug and smile and says, it's just to keep showing up. I just kept showing up. You know what I mean? 47 years of this practice, and I just keep showing up. And so I think that that's something good for us all to know, not only as athletes, but as leaders and business people, that sometimes we can get intimidated by the big picture of things. But when we break it down and we just take one step after the next, great things can happen.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important, especially in the environment that we're all in right now. I know that here in Australia, it's incredibly different, although we had an incident where Brisbane, which is about an hour 45 south of here, went into lockdown for 3 days because we had like 8 people with COVID, which when we say 8 people had COVID, people in the rest of the world have a bit of a laugh. But but I know things are very, very different in other parts of the world. And so to create little bite-sized goals of whatever might bring you some joy, and just what is that one thing that you can do every single day? It might be putting on your favorite music. It might be dancing. It might be, drawing. It might be doing something creative, or if it's possible to get out in nature, or just to go and stand on some grass. I just find hugging a tree or standing on grass, people think I'm crazy, and that's okay. I don't really care what anyone else thinks.
Right.
That's very grounding for me, being out in nature. And if you can't get out in nature, then go onto YouTube and look at nature. I think being able to chunk down and, as you say, consistently do something every single day.
Right.
That's getting back to that whole growth mindset, isn't it? It's like people want to have this massive kind of instant gratification, yay, I did it thing, versus it's the drip in the bucket.
That's right. Well, it's like I've heard people say before, it took me 15 years to become an overnight sensation, right?
Exactly.
People don't realize all the things, we get praised in public for the things we've been always willing to do in private on a consistent basis. And the other thing too is I think that's what keeps us fresh. I'm really convinced that we're happiest when we do have a challenge that we're working on. I just think we are, even though when things might be difficult, if everything was perfect, I think we kind of get bored, right? We seek those challenges, right? And particularly athletes are driven by challenge, right? And business people are, et cetera. But when we have that and we know that we're making consistent progress, I think that's when we're happiest as human beings.
Got a question for you. So I find, especially in the performing arts industry, and I'm wondering whether it happened for you when you were competing. And obviously, I think you still teach a little bit, do you? Or do you?
Yeah, no, I still teach quite a bit, and I still train myself. Yeah.
So do you find, I know as dancers, we are very, very guilty of playing what I call the compare and despair game.
Yeah.
Did you get caught up in that as well?
Yes. You know, and it probably wasn't as much in my training, but man, you get to a tournament and you're looking at this guy and you're looking at that guy, and it's just, yeah, like I said, I was so much of the way I was motivating myself, which I would again do this very differently, was fear of failure, fear of looking bad. And, you know, it was a great driver to a point, but you can't sustain that. And particularly as I moved on in life, I realized that wasn't sustainable. But clearly, yeah. And the other thing, talk about comparison, it wasn't always direct comparison. It was the comparison that was going on in my mind, because what I was thinking is if I wasn't training, the other guy was, and I was getting behind.
Yeah, that's what I
totally.
yeah.
I mean, and there was no rationality to it. I had no ideas what the other guys were doing, but in my mind, I created this, you know, if I took a day or two off, oh my gosh, I'm way behind because the other guy's training. And it worked well to an extent, but it's not sustainable. And when I look at it now, I could have been so much more prepared and healthy moving into competition had I not taken that mindset.
Have another question for you. And I'm pausing in between questions because there's so much gold in here that I want to break them down as well and share them on Instagram so that there's little short nuggets. The men that I have had and the young teenage boys and the men that I've had the pleasure of coaching, how can I say this nicely? I've had to work with them on their ego. And there's usually, like in basketball teams, there's usually like the rooster in the pack.
Right.
And so did you find that happened in your field in Taekwondo, and how did you deal with that? Yeah. And also, what advice would you give to young men that may well be watching this interview? Because as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't serve them.
Right. You know, it's a great question. And yes, I have experienced it. I didn't experience it as much in martial arts because one of the things I think that Taekwondo, martial arts, karate, kung fu, particularly when you have a very good instructor, it's steeped within character development and an element of respect, etc. So no, you'll have elements of that, particularly at tournaments, etc. But in what we call in Korean martial arts, the dojang, where it'd be dojo in Japanese, we didn't really have that. But the other thing that I did is, as I was a football player, not only in high school, but I had an athletic scholarship in college to play football. And that's where you could see it.
Yes,
you could see it really, because you didn't have that basis of respect and humility that you had in martial arts.
Martial arts, very internal.
Right. And in football, now there were some elements of football that helped me in martial arts because there is that high competitive nature. But sometimes, and I quite honestly, from almost, you know, middle school all the way to college, I had really great coaches. But every once and again, coaches in American football would motivate through fear, right? And so that positivity wasn't there. And so I didn't really respond to that super well. Although I will say that one time I was getting yelled at in college by my college coach. It was my freshman year, and I was messing something up, as you know, the freshmen are meant to do. And I didn't even know I did it, but I gave him stink eye. You know what I'm saying? What I mean, stink eye. I mean, he said something to me, and I kind of scowled at him. And he walked over to me and he put his arm around me and he said, "Chris, I want you to know something. When I stop yelling at you, that's when you need to start worrying, because I don't care anymore."
Yeah.
So I tell my martial arts students that, you know, and if I, particularly the ones that I have a whole group I'm getting ready to test for their black belt in a couple of weeks. And I said, hey, if I'm giving you feedback, you know, don't take it. You should be happy about that. Because I tell them, if I wasn't saying, I wouldn't care. And so, you know, it's a good balance. But definitely there were some roosters in football, and had to deal with it. And there was sometimes less than positive feedback that I got playing football, but for the most part, it was pretty good as well.
Cool. Chris, I have loved having this conversation with you, and I know that the people that are listening, either live or later on, are going to find some amazing gold nuggets. Now, you have got some things that I'm going to put down the bottom here. Let's just show this along the bottom. That if they go to your website, tell us about what they can find on your website.
Absolutely. So chrisnatzke.com, which you're seeing right now, that's my website. And what you can see on there is if I may, Catherine, this is okay. I just came out with my latest book, which is Breaking Through, and it debuted on Amazon as a #1 bestseller in its category. And hey, I know. So anyway, if your listeners want, they can go to my website, chrisnatzke.com, and the first thing they'll see is an opportunity for them. You can certainly buy it on Amazon, but if they want to download the introductory chapter complimentary as a free chapter, they can do that on there. Now, I don't know if this is going to work with an international audience, but in the United States, at least, they can also text the word breakthrough to 720-741-6263, and they can also download the chapter that way.
Maybe say that again slowly.
I will. Absolutely. So again, if you text the word breakthrough, all one word, breakthrough.
Lowercase or uppercase, or doesn't matter?
It doesn't. You know what? Do lowercase. Do lowercase. Thank you. To 720-741-6263. And you can also download that complimentary chapter that way. And then, of course, when you go to my website, you can check out my coaching programs and my keynote speaking programs and et cetera. I not only do keynote speaking, but this book was based off of a program I do called a board breaking experience. And so what I do is I go into corporations and teams and help them identify the breakthrough area they want. They write it on one side of a board, and on the other side of the board, they write down their limiting beliefs that have held them back. And then looking at those limiting beliefs, I teach them how to break the board. So it's a pretty cool experience as well.
I remember we spoke about this when we first met at an NSA meeting, because I do something similar in a program as well.
Right.
Chris, it has been an absolute joy to chat with you, and I so appreciate you, your wisdom, and your time.
Thanks. Thank you, Catherine. It's been my honor. Thanks so much.
Okay. Ciao for now.
Ciao.
And I'm going to put this one back on. Oops. And we'll end.
All right. That was great. Thank you. I had a blast.